Laguna Beach, California. It's one of those rare places on Earth where time itself seems to flow differently, not dictated by the ticking of a clock, but by the rhythm of the Pacific. This small, picturesque town, nestled among ancient cliffs and relentless waves on the stunning California coastline, lived its calm, measured life. Here, you wouldn't find the roar of skyscrapers, the frantic pace of big cities, or crowds of hurried tourists scrambling for selfies. Just the boundless ocean, its mighty breath echoing in the sound of the surf, the dense, pungent smell of salt that clung to clothes and hair, and the wind, which never truly died down, carrying tales of distant journeys. It was a true sanctuary for those seeking escape from the noisy world, a place to find harmony with nature, to let their souls dissolve into the vast expanses of water and sky. Even on busy days, you could always find a quiet corner where the city's hum faded before the ocean's eternal whisper. The sun, as it dipped below the horizon each evening, seemed to do so more slowly, gifting the town's residents longer, more enchanting twilight hours. This evening, a sunset hung over the town, painting the sky in incomprehensible shades that gradually shifted from blinding gold to deep crimson, then to soft pinks and blues like the palette of some divine artist. Every cloud seemed a brushstroke from an unseen hand, creating a breathtaking canvas that reminded everyone of nature's majesty. The air was warm, but not scorching, gentle, like the embrace of an old friend returned from afar. A light breeze carried the scent of seaweed and ocean freshness, intertwined with faint hints of pine from the nearby hills and flowers blooming near the houses, creating Laguna's unique, unforgettable aroma. The beach was almost deserted, save for lonely silhouettes of distant, barely visible fishermen on the piers, and a few couples strolling, lost in conversation, their footsteps leaving temporary marks on the wet sand, soon to be washed away by the tide. Only seagulls circled overhead, calling to each other with sharp, drawn-out cries, and the soft, incessant sound of the surf filled the space, like the ocean's own breath, its eternal whisper that never ceased. This atmosphere of calm was almost tangible. It enveloped everyone who dared to step onto the shore. Amidst this harmony stood Kyle Andrews, a tall, slender guy with sun-bleached hair, a testament to countless hours spent under the scorching California sun. His deep green eyes, mirroring the color of sea kelp, gazed at the horizon with a peculiar, almost mystical passion, as if he was trying to look beyond the visible, to absorb all that grandeur. The surfboard under his arm wasn't just sports equipment, it was an extension of himself, a faithful companion in countless adventures unfolding on the water. Every scratch on its surface, every worn patch, was a testament to his history, his battles with the waves, his triumphs. He was 24, and surfing wasn't just his hobby. It was his lifestyle, his philosophy. It was his way of breathing, moving, living. His heart beat in rhythm with the waves, his blood pulsed to the beat of the surf, and every muscle in his body understood the language of the water, its unpredictable yet familiar tongue. Everything on land, problems, the noise of big cities, the hustle and bustle of human relationships, the petty worries that gnawed at everyday life, vanished the moment he touched the ocean. The water washed away everything superfluous, leaving only the pure joy of being, the feeling of complete fusion with the mighty yet familiar element. In the water, he was free, weightless. His thoughts dissolved in the ocean's saltiness, and he felt like part of something much larger than just a man. "Perfect evening," he whispered to himself, gazing at the horizon where the sky met the water. His voice was soft, barely audible above the rising sound of the waves, but it held a deep, almost childlike joy that radiated from his eyes, illuminating them from within. "My waves, I'm coming." It wasn't just a wish. It was a promise he made to the ocean and to himself, a promise of loyalty and devotion. Kyle stepped onto the warm, soft sand, feeling it pleasantly sink beneath his feet, yielding and alive, as if breathing with him. His shorts clung to his skin, soaked with salty air, and the board rested comfortably on his shoulder, its light weight almost imperceptible, as if it were a part of his body, an extra limb without which he couldn't imagine himself. The first steps were hesitant, for his soul hadn't fully left the land with its problems and worries, but then came the run, the laugh, an inner surge, as every muscle in his body yearned to plunge into the water, to feel its refreshing, invigorating coolness. He ran as if the wind itself carried him, and every step was a step toward liberation. He ran into the water, which embraced him like an old friend, cool, but not icy, refreshing and invigorating, washing away the day's fatigue and tension. After wading through a few waves that broke on the shore, creating white shimmering foam, he threw himself onto his board and began paddling forward, towards where the waves grew higher and stronger, towards where the real game began, towards where the real ocean was, his element, his playground. There, a few hundred yards from shore, the world changed. There was nothing but him, his board, and the boundless, pulsating water. Sky and ocean merged into a single space, where Kyle felt himself part of something greater than himself, part of the eternal movement, the cycle of life and death. This was the place where he truly felt alive. When Kyle caught his first wave, he yelled, not from fear, but from pure, unbridled joy that erupted from his chest like a gushing fountain. His surfboard cut through the water with astonishing ease, leaving a white trail behind, as if painting on a canvas of water, and the wind played with his hair, throwing salty spray into his face, bringing freshness and invigoration. He rose, balanced on the crest, his body perfectly synchronized with the water's movement, gliding over the surface as if dancing his own intimate dance with the mighty ocean, his eternal partner. Every movement was perfected over years of practice, every muscle working in unison, as if he were part of the wave itself, an inseparable part of it. He felt every subtle change in the water's movement, every current, and reacted to them instinctively. This lasted for about 10 minutes, or maybe 20. He lost all sense of time, lost in that blissful moment where nothing existed but here and now. Only the waves, rising and falling their hypnotic rhythm, the rhythmic beat of his heart pulsing in time with the surf, and the hypnotic sound of the surf which never ceased, filling the space. This was why he loved the ocean, for its ability to absorb everything superfluous, leaving only the essence, the naked, pure joy of being. For that feeling of freedom when all earthly problems seemed small and insignificant. But beneath every calm, every perfect moment, every minute of serenity, a shadow can always lurk. Kyle was just preparing to catch a new wave, gazing at its perfect curve, when something shifted. The water seemed to lose its lightness. Its surface became unusually smooth, menacing, like polished stone reflecting anxiety. The wind died down, and even the seagulls, which just a minute ago had been crying in the sky, fell silent, as if anticipating trouble, their cries suddenly cut short, leaving an eerie silence. The waves began to behave strangely, as if something immense was moving beneath the surface, creating subtle but palpable oscillations that reverberated through his board and then through his body. He stopped, straightening up on his board, trying to catch the slightest hint of what was happening. His heart pounded faster in his chest like a drumbeat, its rhythm becoming anxious, foreshadowing something ominous. "What was that?" he whispered, looking around, his eyes wide with the uncertainty that filled the air, making him feel small and defenseless. And then the ocean, which just a minute ago had been his friend, his home, his safe haven, became alien and terrifying, filled with an ineffable, primal threat that chilled him to the bone. His imagined paradise had turned into a purgatory. Everything became strange, too quiet. This silence wasn't the kind Kyle was used to during his usual evening surf sessions, when the ocean calmed before its nightly slumber, or in the morning when the world was just waking up. This wasn't the natural silence before dawn when the world still sleeps, and not even the stillness before a storm, when the wind dies down and the air becomes thick and heavy with anticipation. This was an ominous silence, screaming of something unspeakable, of a danger lurking nearby, invisible yet palpable. It pressed down on him, embracing him as if not letting him breathe. Kyle Andrews sat on his board, holding it with his legs, his body tense, his gaze fixed on the ocean, trying to find the source of this strange atmosphere. Every muscle in his body was like a taut string, ready for any movement. Previously, such calm would have been a blessing, a chance to catch the wave of life, to feel complete harmony, to be one with nature, to dissolve into it. But now, something in the air had changed. It no longer felt friendly. It was filled with a premonition that squeezed his chest like an invisible hand, making his heart beat faster. Around him, not another surfer. This was truly odd. Usually on such evenings, when the waves were so perfect, they would attract dozens of enthusiasts, scattered across the water like drops on glass, their joyful shouts echoing over the water, creating a lively, noisy atmosphere. But today Kyle was utterly alone on the water. This only added to his feeling of isolation, as if he found himself on a vast, empty stage where some tragedy was about to unfold, and he was both the sole actor and the sole spectator. The wind had died down completely, its light breath gone. The seagulls were silent, their cries that once filled the space abruptly cut off, leaving an eerie, oppressive stillness. And the water, it seemed to hold its breath, its surface unnaturally smooth, like a polished mirror reflecting the anxious, shifting sky. Every wave that had once been his friend now seemed menacing, carrying the unknown within it. The survival instinct, the same one that saves climbers from avalanches and drivers from accidents, signaling dangers that transcend logic, asserted itself with triple force. Something tightened in his chest, as if an invisible fist clenched his heart, as if it warned, "Don't move further. Go back to shore, immediately. Run from here." His skin prickled, and the hair on the back of his neck stood on end, sending shivers down his entire body. It was a pure, primal sense of danger, passed down from generation to generation, from ancient times when humans were much closer to wild nature. His body reacted, while his mind still tried to find a rational explanation. "Oh, come on, Kyle," he mumbled to himself, trying to shake off the anxiety that gripped him like an icy hand. He tried to convince himself that it was just his imagination, that he was tired, and that the evening calm was just the evening calm, nothing more, just nature settling down for the night. It's just the evening calm, just nature, nothing unusual. You're imagining things. His voice sounded unconvincing even to himself, and he knew it. He felt his inner voice battling this primal fear. He took a deep breath, trying to calm down. The air felt heavy and thick, as if filled with anticipation. He gazed at the horizon and saw the next wave. It was perfect. Clean, smooth, with that ideal curve he loved so much, beckoning him to act, promising unforgettable sensations of gliding, of flight. And in that moment, fear receded, giving way to adrenaline and passion, that insatiable hunger for surfing that governed his life, that was the very meaning of his existence. All that remained was the desire for movement, for the feeling of gliding over the water, for merging with its power, for feeling himself part of its mighty rhythm once more. "Okay, let's go," he told himself. His voice sounded resolute despite the inner doubts that continued to gnaw at him like a worm, and began to paddle, his hands powerfully slicing through the water, propelling him forward toward the perfect wave that awaited him. He paddled, feeling neither fatigue nor doubt, completely focused on the movement, on the board, on the water. When he finally stood on his board and rode the wave, for a few seconds everything fell into place. The sound of the surf, which now seemed like a hymn, a triumph of his skill. The water droplets in the air sparkling in the last rays of the sun like millions of diamonds scattered across an invisible canvas. His body in perfect balance with the force of nature. This was his moment of triumph, his song, his dance with the ocean, his eternal partner. He was invincible, one with the ocean, his heart beating in unison with every wave. He felt every subtle change in the water's movement, every current, and reacted to them instinctively as if he himself were a part of this element. And then, a strike. Unexpected, powerful, from deep below, from an unknown depth that suddenly opened beneath him. Something enormous, unseen, lifted him from his board. It wasn't just a hit. It was an explosion. He wasn't just knocked off, he was thrown into the air like a toy doll. Something ejected him from his familiar element, from his safe world. Kyle's body described an arc. For a moment, he felt weightless, and then with a loud splash, he fell into the water, its cold surface meeting him with cruel indifference, as if it had suddenly turned hostile. At first, he didn't understand what had happened. His brain, clouded by shock, couldn't process the incoming information. He only felt the cold piercing from head to toe, his body contracting from the surprise, his muscles tensing to their limit. Then, a sharp, unbearable pain in his back, radiating through every cell, and another in his left leg which pierced him to the bone, causing cramps and numbness. It was a pain he had never felt before, a pain that paralyzed his will. He surfaced, gasping for air, choking on water that tasted salty, but not the usual ocean saltiness, rather a bitter, metallic taste of blood filling his mouth. He coughed, trying to breathe, but the pain was too strong. Around him, empty. No other person, no sign of his board. It must have flown off with the impact. Only ripples on the water spreading from the point of impact like witnesses to his tragedy unfolding in complete solitude. And blood. His blood. The underwater darkness began to fill with red, dissolving into the greenish depths, creating an eerie haze that obscured visibility. Kyle tried to stay afloat, his hands grasping at the air, but his legs barely obeyed, as if immobilized by invisible shackles, paralyzed by fear and pain. Every movement was a struggle. It was a shark. The thought came like a bolt from the blue, striking him to the core, paralyzing his will, leaving him utterly defenseless. Not a toy, not from a movie. A real, predatory, fast, deadly shark. His body, the sun, the sunset, the waves, everything lost its meaning. The world turned upside down, transforming into a chaotic, bloody nightmare. The survival instinct screamed, "Swim to shore! Swim! Save yourself! Don't give up!" But his body couldn't. Every movement caused unbearable pain, and fear had constricted every muscle, turning him into a stone incapable of movement, of resistance. And then, another push, but different this time. Soft, gentle, confidently directed. Something underwater pushed him from the bottom, giving him momentum, as if to help him stay afloat. Then a second push, this time from the side, pushing him even harder, as if indicating the direction he should move. He looked around, his eyes painfully peering into the murky water, which was now stained red. Something gray and streamlined flashed beneath the surface, creating slight ripples that spread across the water. And then another, and another. Dolphins.
At first he thought it was a hallucination, from the pain, from the fear, from the blood loss that clouded his consciousness. His brain refused to believe what his eyes saw. It was too incredible. But no, these were real dolphins. They circled around him, glided on the surface, pushing him towards the shore, as if they knew what to do, as if they had a plan to save him. And in that moment, he understood. He wasn't alone. In this bloody nightmare, amidst fear and pain, a ray of hope appeared, a light that broke through the darkness, giving him a chance. Pain. That was the first thing he recognized. Sharp, like a knife blade piercing flesh, tearing it apart, piercing like thunder striking directly into the body, shattering it into pieces, like a crystal vase shattering into 1,000 tiny fragments. It was unlike any injury Kyle had ever experienced. Not a broken bone, not a deep cut, not a burn. This was pain that came from within, from the depths of his being, mingling with the sickening sensation of being ripped apart as if he were being torn alive, and every cell screamed in agony. Every cell screamed, every nerve pulsed, sending signals of unbearable torment. It was pure, primal terror that permeated his very brain. After the initial strike, his body didn't rise. It sank, slowly, like a heavy stone, pulling him deeper, into the darkness that embraced him from all sides, promising oblivion. Air escaped from his lungs in bubbles that silently rose to the surface, like the last witnesses of a life about to end. He fought for every breath, but the water relentlessly filled his lungs. When he opened his eyes underwater, the world was greenish, murky, as if dissolved in paint, creating an eerie haze. Visibility was zero, and this added to the horror. Salt stung his eyes, making him blink as if he were trying to ward off a mirage, but in vain. And then he saw a shadow. Huge, fast as lightning, it flashed past him, leaving behind a swirl of sand from the bottom, stirred up by its mighty tail, disappearing as quickly as it appeared. It was a silhouetted figure that brought death, its outlines blurred, but menacing, and he instantly knew what it was. A shark. A great white shark. His worst nightmare. Kyle couldn't believe it. It was here, with him, in the very water he considered his home, a place of peace and solace, his personal paradise. And it wasn't a guest, it was the master, a merciless predator that had come for its prey. His brain refused to accept this reality, this terrifying fact that defied everything he believed. It was impossible. This couldn't be happening to him. Suddenly, he felt movement again. Its rough, scaly body touched his leg, gliding, as if warning him before delivering the next deadly blow. Then, another sharp push, strong, powerful, making his body convulse as if from an electric shock. Like a bullet, it shot from the depths and struck him from below, seizing his back, pulling him into this deadly dance from which there was no escape, only inevitable demise. Its teeth bit into him like hooks. He would remember that moment forever. It etched itself into his memory like a tattoo on his soul, like an eternal scar that would bleed his entire life. Time stopped. The world around him froze, turning into a motionless tableau of horror, where every detail was carved with infernal precision. The shark opened its jaws, a gaping maw with 2 rows of razor-sharp teeth like a circular saw, ready to tear him to pieces like a rag. Its eyes, cold, dark, emotionless, empty, like 2 black holes that reflected no thought, no feeling, only the primal instinct of a killer, cold, merciless, ancient as the ocean itself. It bit not in defense, not by accident. This was a predatory attack, with calculation, with an instinct honed over millions of years since the beginning of time to hunt and kill. Kyle felt its teeth sink into the muscles of his back, penetrating deep, tearing flesh like paper. How his skin tore, how fibers broke, how his body was being ripped apart and every nerve screamed in unbearable, tearing pain that drove him mad. How the pain mingled with the water, dissolving into it, creating a red haze that enveloped him like a shroud. He felt a hot wave of blood spreading through his body, warming him, but this warmth was the harbinger of death, not life. He screamed underwater, but the sound didn't reach the world that was so close and yet so far. His scream drowned in the depths, dissolving into a silent tragedy that no one could hear, no one could share. He was alone with his death.
He tried to kick it. There was no strength. His limbs were paralyzed by shock and pain. They wouldn't obey. His arm, it wouldn't obey, as if detached from his body, belonging to someone else who felt no pain. His eyes filled with salty tears that mixed with seawater, creating a blurry, eerie picture where everything was indistinct and unreal. And then, silence. The shark disappeared, as if it had never been there, as if it was just a terrible dream from which he would soon wake up, and everything would return to normal. But the pain was too real. He surfaced, gasping for air that seemed the sweetest in his life, though it burned his lungs. This was the first true breath after the attack, the first breath, ragged, full of pain, that pierced him from head to toe like 1,000 needles. The water around him, pink, then dark red, spreading in large patches as if someone had spilled paint that colored the surrounding world with the color of his own blood. I'm losing blood. This thought was cold, clear, like a verdict that couldn't be appealed. He felt life slowly leaving him. He looked at his hand. It trembled like a leaf in the wind, about to fall off, his body shaking uncontrollably. On the board, which miraculously floated nearby, bloody traces remained like eerie imprints of this encounter, evidence of what had happened. He tried to grab on, to pull himself up, but the pain was unbearable, and his body didn't respond, refusing to obey his will. He needed to swim. Swim to shore, to salvation. But his body no longer wanted to listen. Every muscle, every cell screamed, surrender.
capitulation, that the fight was futile. The thought flashed through his mind, this is the end. I won't go back. I won't say goodbye to my parents. I won't call my friend. I won't see the ocean again. Won't feel its warm water. Won't catch a wave. Won't feel that freedom, that flight. The last words that flashed through his mind were filled with bitter regret for a lost life, for everything he loved. And just at that moment, when he was about to give up, when the last spark of hope began to fade and his consciousness clouded, the water beneath him moved again. But this time, differently. It wasn't an attack. It was movement, soft, rhythmic, gliding. It was unfamiliar, but not threatening. It foreshadowed something else, something inexplicable. Dolphins? One, then a second, a third. They appeared as if from nowhere, like ghosts from the depths that rose before him, emerging from nothing. They surrounded him like a living shield, a wall of bodies protecting him. One gently touched his ribs, its touch soft but palpable, as if someone was trying to calm him. Another pushed him closer to the board as if offering support, a chance to grab hold of life, that last lifeline. They acted in unison, like a team that had undergone hundreds of training sessions, knowing each other's every move, every gesture, every intention. Kyle didn't understand what was happening. His brain, clouded by pain and fear, couldn't comprehend this inexplicable reality, this unexpected miracle. But in his heart, for the first time, hope appeared. In this bloody nightmare, he saw a light, and it came from creatures that once seemed just a part of nature, a part of the landscape, ordinary inhabitants of the ocean, but now became his saviors. They became his only chance at life.
Water, blood, pain. These three words became his reality, merging into a terrifying symphony of suffering that pierced him to the very core of his brain. Every breath, every movement reverberated with these sensations. But amidst all this, movement. Movement that wasn't hostile. It was smooth, gentle, warm, like the breath of kindness itself penetrating his chilled body, giving him an unusual sense of calm. The dolphins didn't panic, didn't flee as most animals would in the face of such a life-threatening predator. They acted confidently, as if they knew time was running out, perhaps mere seconds, and every second was precious, every moment decided his fate. Each of their movements was deliberate, purposeful, filled with resolve. Kyle felt one of them gently pushing his body closer to the board, as if helping him find a foothold, something he could cling to like a lifeline. Another stayed close, as if guarding him, ready to help at any moment to become a living shield, protecting him from the unseen threat. A third circled, occasionally surfacing and sending a fountain of water into the sky as if signaling or simply attracting the shark's attention, distracting it from him. "What are you doing? Why are you here? Why are you saving me? You're wild creatures." These questions raced to Kyle's mind, but they were no longer important. Only one thing mattered. They were saving him. It was a miracle, happening right here, in the cold, deadly waters of Laguna Beach, and he was its witness, its center. And just at that moment, when hope was rekindled in his eyes and his body momentarily relaxed with the realization that he wasn't alone in this battle, it returned. The shark. From the depths, from the darkness that concealed its eerie figure, it surfaced swiftly, like an arrow shot from a drawn bow, heading straight for the dolphins, its body tense, ready to attack. Its massive body cut through the water, creating a powerful wave that struck Kyle's face, making him cough, inhaling salty water. Its eyes, cold as ice, again burned with a hungry, merciless fire. Its target, the prey it hadn't finished off, him, the human. The dolphins instantly regrouped. Their movements were synchronized, almost telepathic, as if they read each other's minds, understanding every intention. One of them, with incredible speed, darted to meet the predator, striking its head from the side, forcing the shark to deviate slightly from its course, losing balance.
Another, larger one, circled, diverting its attention, creating the illusion of a greater threat, making the shark pursue it instead of Kyle. He saw it as if in slow motion. A scene he once could only have seen in a wildlife documentary was now unfolding before his eyes in a terrifying reality, far scarier than any movie. For him, for his sake, these noble creatures, despite the danger, risked their lives to protect him, an utterly unfamiliar being. It was an act of pure, selfless altruism. The shark, irritated by the resistance, made another lunge. It flashed beneath him, so close that he felt the water around him warm from its presence, from its warm, predatory body passing by. He didn't know how much more he could endure. Blood still flowed from the wound, forming a red haze that stained the water, turning it into a bloody mess. His strength was fading with each second. His consciousness hovered on the brink, threatening to engulf him again in darkness from which there would be no return.
The dolphins attacked again. They struck it with their noses, quickly, rhythmically, delivering precise blows to sensitive spots, to the belly, to the head. One of them even leaped over the water like a torpedo and submerged again, distracting the shark, making it retreat, looking for easier prey, confusing it. This wasn't just a game. This was a battle against an ancient predator that symbolized primal fear, against his own death, against the despair that tried to consume him. And in this circle, he, helpless, wounded, but still alive, was at the center of an incredible miracle he was witnessing. Kyle clung to his board with both hands. He gripped it tightly so as not to let go, to maintain some support in this chaos. One dolphin pushed him again, harder, this time giving a clear direction. He began to move slowly towards the shore, gliding through the water, every movement causing pain, but he had to do it. He had to fight for his life, for every breath, for every moment. Just a little more, just a few more yards, he repeated to himself, like a mantra that gave him strength, that helped him hold on. He couldn't give up. He saw the silhouette of the shore, and that was the only thing keeping him afloat. He prayed, although he hadn't believed in anything supernatural for a long time, considering himself a rational person. He just prayed to the dolphins, to the ocean, to life, to any higher power that might hear him. He didn't want to die. Not today. When he finally saw the shore, he couldn't believe his eyes. People, lifeguards who were already by the water, running towards him, their silhouettes becoming clearer with every yard, filling his heart with hope that had almost faded. Someone was already wading into the water to help him. Someone was shouting, and those shouts were filled with relief, reaching him through the sound of the waves, like a melody of salvation. The dolphin swam alongside him for a few more seconds, escorting him to the shallow water, as if making sure he was safe, that he was handed over to reliable hands. Then they stopped. One last time, it turned towards Kyle, its eyes seeming to radiate understanding, as if checking, "Are you okay? Are you saved?" and disappeared beneath a wave, dissolving into the sea's abyss as suddenly as it had appeared. Their mission was accomplished. No one will believe this, Kyle thought, before losing consciousness, feeling his body shut down, sinking into darkness, but this time it was the darkness of peace. But he survived, and this was just the beginning of a new life, a new path he had to walk. When Kyle lost consciousness, the world plunged into blackness, thick, boundless, engulfing him from all sides like a gentle but irreversible sleep. His consciousness receded, abandoning itself to the unknown. He didn't see his body, pushed by the waves, slowly drifting towards the shore, like a piece of wreckage washed ashore, having lost its function and simply floating with the current. He didn't hear the shouts of the lifeguards, who were already waist-deep in the water, their voices penetrating only as a distant, muffled hum, as if from another dimension that had no bearing on him, not reaching his ears. For him, nothing existed but a bottomless abyss
and the ghostly echo of pain that faded, turning into a dull, pulsating impulse somewhere deep within his consciousness, like the last reverberation of the past.
In this blackness there was no sense of time, no landmarks, no up, no down, no beginning, no end. Only chaotic flashes of consciousness breaking through the fog of oblivion like rays of light through a dense forest, momentarily illuminating the outlines of the past. He saw his parents' faces, their smiles, felt the warmth of their embraces that always gave him protection and unconditional love. He saw his surfboard gleaming in the sun, and the same sunset over the ocean that he had seen last before the attack. Golden, calm, serene. These images flickered like old film reels that suddenly came to life and then disappeared again into the darkness, engulfing him back into the void, into nothingness. He saw the faces of his friends, heard their laughter, felt the warmth of the summer sun on his skin. These were snippets of life flashing before his eyes like a final farewell. This state was similar to a deep, heavy sleep, but at the same time, he felt his soul hanging by a thread, wavering on the brink of life and death, on a thin, invisible string about to break. It was the ultimate test when the body had already given up, but the spirit still fought, unwilling to let go. His body had already surrendered, limply drifting with the current like a lifeless doll, but somewhere deep within his subconscious, a spark of life still flickered, preventing him from completely letting go, from surrendering to the will of the elements. He felt the cold piercing him through and through in a strange, unreal sensation of lightness, as if he were hovering in the air, detached from earthly reality, traveling into the unknown. He heard a distant hum, similar to the sound of wind, but it was perhaps the sound of blood in his ears, or a harbinger of something greater. Later, however, after his recovery, when Kyle replayed that day many times, he remembered this moment differently. Sometimes it seemed to him that he saw a light, bright, warm, beckoning him, promising peace and eternal rest. It was a feeling of absolute peace. Other times, only complete emptiness, frightening in its silence, its hopelessness, its nothingness. This was a deeply personal and mystical moment in the story that forever changed his perception of being, his attitude towards life and death, towards the value of every moment. This fleeting journey to the edge of existence left an imprint on his soul, filling it with respect for the fragility of life, for its uniqueness. He understood that life is a gift, and every second of it is precious. In this blackness where there was no sight and no sounds, only sensations remained. The sensation of the heaviness of his own body trying to resist gravity, and the sensation of the lightness of his soul, as if it were flying away. The sensation of the cold water piercing him through and through, and a strange inner warmth coming from somewhere deep inside, sustaining him. He was between two worlds, between consciousness and unconsciousness, between life and death. It was the moment when his existence was reduced to a pure, undivided essence, fighting for survival. Perhaps it was then, when his consciousness was on the brink, that he subconsciously felt the presence of the dolphins, their touch, their energy, breaking through the fog. This state was a kind of transition, a threshold, crossing which he was destined to change forever. An unconscious Kyle lay on the stretcher, which lifeguards quickly carried to shore, their steps confident yet tense, every movement coordinated and decisive. Through the semi-consciousness that ebbed and flowed, he heard loud shouts, a flurry of activity, felt the cold water dripping from his body, mingling with the sand, and someone's hands gently yet firmly lifting him, transferring him from the sand to the stretcher. The smell of salt, blood, and the medical supplies already in use blended into a strange, unsettling aroma that resonated in his dizzy head, causing nausea. It was a chaos of sounds and sensations that permeated the fog of his consciousness.
When he was pulled onto the sand, the first thing he felt was a sharp, piercing pain that shot through his entire body, tearing him from the fog of unconsciousness. He tried to breathe, but his lungs burned and every breath caused unbearable pain in his torn back. Every movement was torture. He fought for every gulp of air, his chest rising and falling with effort. Lifeguards' faces hovered over him, concerned but focused, their eyes radiating professionalism, their hands working quickly and in unison. They swiftly examined his wounds, their gazes stern but resolute. They applied the first bandages, trying to stop the heavy, dangerous bleeding that flowed from his body, staining the sand. His left leg was severely damaged, skin torn, muscles exposed, and blood seeped through his clothing, leaving wet stains. On his back were deep, ragged wounds from the shark's teeth, looking like ripped pieces of flesh, gruesome like horror movie scenes come to life. Every scar promised to leave a memory of this day. "Hang in there, buddy! The ambulance is on its way! You're going to make it! We won't leave you!" Someone's voice, full of hope and encouragement, reached him through the haze of pain, like a beacon in the darkness, pointing the way to salvation. Kyle couldn't distinguish faces, but he felt their presence, their support. He felt his body shaking from cold and shock, an uncontrollable tremor piercing him to the bone, from his teeth to his fingertips. Panic, which had been muted earlier, now returned, surging like a wave, threatening to engulf him completely, causing nausea. He tried to say something, opened his mouth, but the words caught in his throat. He couldn't utter a sound, only a gasp. He wanted to tell them about the dolphins, about how they saved him, about their miraculous intervention. But his mind was too clouded, and his body wouldn't obey, preventing him from speaking. Soon, through the noise and commotion, the ambulance arrived. Its sirens blared over the beach, piercing the evening silence, their shrill sound heralding the beginning of a new phase of the fight, this time for his life. Paramedics quickly and professionally loaded him onto the stretcher. Their movements were coordinated, each knowing their role, acting without unnecessary words. Everything happened as if in a haze. The flickering of lights, their red and blue reflections on the sand, voices merging into an intelligible hum, the sensation of movement as he was carefully transported. He was transferred into the ambulance where he was already expecting to receive more qualified help that could save him. The last thing he saw before the doors closed was the dark, boundless sea, which just a minute ago had almost taken his life, but now stood as a witness to his rescue, as if watching his departure. He saw its outlines, felt its presence, and understood that his life would never be the same. Inside the ambulance, the world again shrunk to a small, enclosed space. The smell of disinfectant, blood, and the medic's sweat filled the air. Kyle lay, his breathing shallow and ragged. The paramedics worked quickly, their hands moving confidently and in unison. He heard their voices, but the words were indistinct, as if spoken through thick glass. Pulse weak, bleeding intense, shock. These words which he heard through his state were like fragments of a puzzle forming a terrifying picture. He was given an injection, and the pain receded slightly, giving way to a dull, pulsating emptiness. He felt his body, like a ship sailing from shore, slowly sinking into consciousness, but he stayed afloat, firmly clinging to the receding reality. On the way to the hospital, the ambulance occasionally braked sharply, and Kyle felt every jolt, every turn, which intensified the pain. He heard the siren cutting through the city's night silence, its piercing sound a symbol of a struggle for life. Every sound that reached him was filled with anxiety and haste. He realized that something extremely important was happening now, something that would decide his future fate. Fragments of memories flashed through his mind. The dolphins' faces, their eyes full of understanding, their bodies protecting him. He kept returning to this amazing image, which was the only light in this darkness. It was his mantra, his hope.
"We're almost there. Hang on," a paramedic told him, patting his shoulder. Kyle felt the touch, and it gave him a little strength. He clenched his jaw, trying not to lose consciousness completely, not to disappear into oblivion. He saw the streetlights flashing outside the window, heard the hum of the city that never sleeps. All this seemed to be happening in another reality, far from his own, which was filled with pain and fear. And then the ambulance stopped. A sharp jolt, and the doors opened. The bright hospital lights illuminated his face, and he closed his eyes, feeling himself being transferred again, this time onto a hospital gurney. He heard someone loudly calling his name, and then medical terms he didn't understand. Patient after shark attack, multiple lacerations, severe blood loss, shock. This was his life, his condition turned into a diagnosis.
He felt himself being quickly wheeled down corridors past unfamiliar faces flashing in his field of vision. His last thought before consciousness finally left him was of the dolphins, of their eyes, of their rescue. He knew he had to tell the world what had happened. It was more important than any pain. Coming to, Kyle felt himself lying on something soft but unusually firm, with some support beneath his back that kept him from moving. The smell of antiseptic and medicine sharply hit his nostrils, causing an unpleasant sensation and nausea, reminding him where he was. Bright, sterile lamps blinded his eyes, their cold light piercing through his eyelids, making him blink and squint. He was in the hospital. A dull but unbearable pain permeated his entire body, radiating from everywhere, reverberating in every cell, pulsing in every vein. Every muscle, every bone, every nerve ached, as if he had been torn apart. He could barely move. Every movement caused a new wave of pain. His parents sat beside him. Their faces were swollen from tears, but their eyes held a glimmer of relief, mixed with shock and gratitude that he was alive. His mother held his hand tightly, her touch gentle and soothing, as if she was trying to transfer all her love and strength to him. Her father remained silent, his face tense, but his gaze, fixed on his son, spoke more than 1,000 words, expressing all his concern and pain, all the fear he had endured. It was a moment of emotional reunion, when the whole family realized that a miracle had happened, and they were together again, albeit in such circumstances. "My boy, you're alive! You're with us!" his mother whispered, her voice trembling with restrained emotions that overwhelmed her. She stroked his hair, and her touch was the sweetest medicine for him. Kyle tried to smile, but the pain wouldn't allow it. He merely nodded, the only movement he was capable of to show that he heard them. Doctors and nurses frequently entered the room, their white coats flickering in Kyle's eyes, their faces expressing professionalism. They performed examinations, changed bandages, administered medication, their movements confident and coordinated. But for him, it was endless torture. His back was completely bandaged, his left leg too, transformed into a tangled mass of bandages beneath which pain pulsed. He felt that part of his body was missing, paralyzed, numb, feeling nothing but pain that never completely receded.
During the first few days in the hospital, unbearable pain was his constant companion. Even under the influence of strong analgesics, it didn't disappear completely, only slightly dulled, leaving behind a dull, aching echo. Every change in position, every movement, even the slightest, caused a new attack of sharp pain that pierced him to the bone. He lay motionless, trying to find some position to alleviate the suffering, but it was in vain. At night, fear returned, surging like a wave. The image of the shark, its cold eyes, its terrifying teeth, its gaping maw, all of it haunted him, penetrating his dreams. He woke up at night from his own screams, sweating and gasping for breath, his body trembling with terror. And he couldn't shake the feeling that the shark was still nearby, somewhere under the bed. PTSD began to manifest in all its destructive force. Every sound resembling a splash of water, every sudden movement resembling a shark attack, triggered panic, making his heart pound wildly and his breathing quicken. He feared the darkness, feared falling asleep, feared being alone. His mind was captive to nightmares that never let him go. The ocean, which had been his sanctuary, his home, his greatest love, now became the source of his deepest terror, a symbol of death waiting for him. He felt disgusted by salty water, by the smell of the sea. "I'll never go back in the water," he thought. This thought was firm, unyielding like a rock. It was part of his defense mechanism, an attempt to protect himself from reliving the horror, from new suffering. He was ready to give up everything he loved, surfing, freedom, for the sake of safety, for the sake of peace. This thought was the only one that gave him some sense of control over his life. But there were other moments. When the pain receded slightly, when the medication began to work, he remembered the dolphins. Their streamlined bodies, their gentle nudges, their protection, their inexplicable help that came from nowhere. This was the only bright spot remaining in his consciousness amidst the darkness of pain and fear, a ray of hope in the darkness that constantly enveloped him. He tried to tell the doctors and nurses about them, but they just nodded sympathetically, smiling, probably considering it a consequence of shock or hallucinations caused by the trauma that he hadn't fully recovered. Only his parents believed him. Seeing sincerity in his eyes, they knew he wasn't making it up and that something truly amazing had happened. They held his hand and listened to his stories, trying to catch every word to understand what he had been through. His room was filled with flowers and cards from caring people. Many wrote him words of support, expressing admiration for his resilience. But the most important was the presence of his parents. His mother sat by him for hours, reading to him or simply silently holding his hand. His father, usually reserved, now visited frequently, talking to him about everyday things to distract him from thoughts of his ordeal. They were his anchor, his foundation in this new, incomprehensible world of pain and fear. They brought him his favorite books, his laptop, trying to create some comfort in this sterile environment. Every day in the hospital was a battle with pain, with panic attacks, with nightmares, with a sense of helplessness. But deep down, beside the fear, flickered a spark of hope that one day he would be able to feel free again, even if it wasn't in the ocean. He didn't know how, but he believed there was a way out. He was alive, and that was the most important thing.
Noise, cameras, camera flashes, questions pouring from all sides like hail suddenly descending on his hospital room. Kyle's story couldn't go unnoticed. It was too striking, too unusual to remain silent about. A person rescued from a shark, and with the help of dolphins? It wasn't just news, it was a sensation that went beyond the everyday, something that overturned perceptions of nature. His room turned into a mini press center, although doctors tried to limit journalists' access, understanding that excessive stress could harm his recovery. But even closed doors and established restrictions couldn't stop the wave of interest that engulfed his life. His story had already spread worldwide. Television channels, newspapers, radio stations, everyone wanted to hear his account, to get exclusive material. Correspondents flocked from all corners of the globe, trying to get an interview. Newspaper headlines screamed about the miracle of Laguna Beach, dolphin saviors, the man saved by sea angels. Photographs of his mangled board, torn shorts, his pale face, all of it circulated globally, becoming a symbol of his tragedy and his miraculous rescue. He gave his first interviews, his voice weak, barely audible yet firm, filled with an inner strength that broke through the pain. He recounted everything that happened, the sunset, the feeling of danger preceding the attack, the shark attack itself, the unbearable pain, the moments when he thought it was over, and of course about the dolphin saviors, about their inexplicable yet very real help. He repeated his story again and again, reliving it each time, feeling the same fear and the same astonishment. I had already said goodbye to life. I thought it was the end. All the blood was draining from me. I felt life leaving my body, slowly fading away. And then they appeared, these dolphins. They surrounded me, drove the shark away. They saved me, gave me a second chance, brought me back to life. His words were sincere, filled with gratitude and wonder, emanating from the depths of his heart. He didn't try to embellish the story. It was dramatic enough on its own, so much so that it was hard to believe. Journalists listened, holding their breath, their faces expressing a mix of shock and fascination. Some wrote down every word, their pens quickly moving across notebooks, trying to capture every detail. Some skeptically raised their eyebrows, their gaze expressing doubt, but most were impressed by this unusual story that went beyond conventional understanding, beyond the rational. Scientists and animal psychologists shared their opinions on air, discussing the phenomenon of altruism in animals, trying to find a scientific explanation for this miracle, but it was impossible.
Kyle's story became viral, spreading worldwide like wildfire, touching the hearts of millions of people who were searching for miracles in their own lives. He became a hero against his own will, a symbol of the miracle that can happen at the most terrifying moment when all hope seems lost. He began receiving letters of support from all over the world. People shared their own stories of miraculous rescues, of connections with animals, of inexplicable events that changed their lives. This was a moment when his personal tragedy became a source of hope for millions, inspiring them to believe in the extraordinary, in goodness, in mutual aid. He felt his story becoming something more than just a personal experience. However, with popularity came pressure. Not everyone believed his story. Some skeptics claimed these were hallucinations caused by shock and blood loss, or that the dolphins were just playing and happened to be nearby by chance, and it was simply a coincidence. They tried to find a rational explanation for what seemed irrational, refusing to believe in a miracle. Kyle had to defend his truth, his version of events, but he knew what he had seen. He knew that he had been saved, and no skeptic's doubts could shake his faith, for he had experienced it himself. He felt that his story, told to millions, became his duty. He had to be the voice of those who saved him. This was a time when his life changed not only physically, but also publicly. He was no longer just a surfer from Laguna Beach. He became the man saved by dolphins, and that title now preceded his own name. He felt people's stares on him, their curiosity, their doubts, their admiration. It was difficult, but he understood that his story mattered, and it needed to be heard.
The road to recovery was long and painful, filled with daily challenges and exhausting efforts. Kyle spent several weeks in the hospital, where each day was filled with pain, medical procedures, and battles with infections. Then, after being discharged, he spent several more months undergoing intensive rehabilitation at a specialized center. Physical recovery was exhausting. Daily physiotherapy sessions, painful exercises that worked atrophied muscles, massages that felt like torture. His muscles had atrophied from immobility. His wounds healed slowly, leaving ugly pink scars on his back and leg that served as reminders of the terror he had experienced. Every movement caused pain, but he gritted his teeth and continued, knowing there was no other way. His physical therapist, an elderly but strict woman, wouldn't let him give up, and her support was invaluable. Every step, Kyle, is a small victory. Every movement is a step towards life, she would repeat when he was almost collapsing from exhaustion and pain shot through his body. But far more challenging was spiritual recovery. PTSD wouldn't let him go, like an invisible shadow constantly pursuing him. Every sound resembling a splash of water, every sudden movement resembling a shark attack triggered panic, making his heart pound wildly and his breathing quicken, as if he were back in the water, surrounded by the predator. He feared falling asleep, for in his dreams the shark came, its maw, its eyes, its teeth, its terrifying silhouette. He woke up at night from his own screams, sweating and gasping for breath, his body trembling with terror, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the shark was still nearby, somewhere under the bed, waiting for him. He feared the darkness, feared being alone. His mind was captive to nightmares that never let him go. I saw it. It was so big. Its eyes, they were empty, devoid of any emotion. I thought it was going to eat me alive, tear me to pieces. His voice, sounding weak but with a tremor, recounted these nightmares that wouldn't let him go even after months of treatment. These memories were so vivid, so real, that he felt as if he was reliving the moment. He avoided any mention of the ocean, even on television. The sight of blue water made him nauseous and break into a cold sweat, feeling as if he was drowning again. His surfboard, once a symbol of freedom and joy, now stood in the corner of his room, covered in dust, like a monument to lost love, to his past life that seemed so distant. He couldn't even look at it without trembling. His parents and friends were by his side, giving him endless support. Their love was his anchor. They listened to his stories, held his hand during panic attacks, simply were there. Their presence was more valuable than any words. His mother spent hours by his side, reading to him, and his father talked to him about sports, about the news, about anything that could distract him from his terrifying thoughts. He also saw a psychologist who helped him cope with the trauma, step by step emerging from this emotional trap, learning to live with it. These were long, difficult conversations, but they gradually brought relief. One of the most important steps in his recovery was returning to simple things that once brought him joy. He started drawing again. His hands, once paralyzed, now created again. Listening to music that filled his soul with peace. Spending time in nature, but far from the water, in forests, in mountains, where he felt safe. He relearned to enjoy life, to find beauty in small things, even if it was a life without the ocean, without surfing. He walked in parks, breathed fresh air, watched birds, trying to find solace in tranquility. His friends tried to get him involved in other sports, cycling, hiking. He tried, but nothing replaced the feeling of a wave beneath his board, that special connection with the ocean. He knew his heart still belonged to the sea, even if his mind feared it. This inner struggle was his toughest test. Could he ever return to what he loved most? Could he overcome his fear? He didn't know the answer, but somewhere deep inside, a small hope flickered. Sometimes he felt anger at the shark, at the ocean, at fate that had treated him so cruelly. But then memories of the dolphins would appear, and anger would turn into deep gratitude. They were his light, his hope. They reminded him that even in the deepest darkness, light can appear. This section became one of the most emotional and important in Kyle's entire story. It was the culmination of his inner struggle, his journey from fear to the triumph of spirit. Months of rehabilitation, sleepless nights filled with nightmares, and an overwhelming fear of the ocean all led to this moment. For several weeks, Kyle came to the beach. He sat on the shore, far from the water, looking at the ocean, his gaze filled with fear, doubt, but also a hidden longing. He remembered the pain, the terror of that attack, the cold sensation of the shark's jaws that almost took his life. He remembered the blood, the panic, the helplessness. But something irresistible, something deep inside, called him back to the very element that had almost killed him. It wasn't just a love for surfing. It was the feeling of incompleteness, an unresolved conflict with himself and with the ocean.
I knew I had to do it, not for anyone else, but for myself, to show myself that I wasn't broken, that I wasn't defeated, that the shark hadn't taken everything from me, hadn't taken my soul, my passion. His voice, filled with determination, sounded strong, but with a slight tremor. He had to prove to himself that he was stronger than his fear. The first steps were the hardest. These weren't just steps, but the overcoming of a huge inner wall. One morning, as the sun was just beginning to rise above the horizon, illuminating the water with a soft golden light, Kyle resolutely stood up. His legs trembled as never before. He walked to the water, which gently lapped at the sand. He put his foot in the water. Cold, treacherous, it seemed alive to him. It seemed to be waiting for him. Memories flooded back. Blood, pain, the shark's cold gaze, the feeling of its body nearby. He felt panic, wanted to turn around and run, hide, forget everything. His heart pounded like crazy. His lungs seemed unable to breathe. But he took another step, and another. Every step was a struggle, but also a small victory. He slowly but confidently entered the water, first to his ankles, then to his knees, then to his waist. He felt the cold enveloping him, felt the water touching his wounds, and it seemed to him that they began to bleed again, though it was only a sensation. His breathing quickened, his gaze wandered over the surface, searching for danger, his eyes darting in search of a shadow, any movement. But with each step, with each breath of salty air, something changed. The fear gradually receded, giving way to something else, something familiar. His friends and parents stood on the shore, supporting him. They didn't speak,
only their gazes were filled with support and understanding. This had to be a quiet but incredibly powerful moment when a person overcomes their greatest fear. Kyle felt their presence, and it gave him extra strength. Kyle didn't take his board right away. First, he simply floated near the shore, allowing the water to embrace his body, feeling its movement, its gentle push. He felt its coldness, its power, but this time without fear. Gradually, he began to feel connected to the ocean again, the same connection he had before, but now it was deeper, more meaningful. The water once again became his friend, not an enemy, a part of him, his home. He allowed himself to relax, to surrender to the current, to feel its pleasant coolness on his skin. When he finally picked up his surfboard, the feeling was strange. It was lighter than he remembered, but at the same time, heavier with the weight of memories. He sat on it carefully and began to paddle. At first, his movements were uncertain. His muscles hadn't fully recovered. But with each stroke, with each yard he moved away from the shore, confidence returned to him. He caught waves again, his face glowing with a smile mixed with tears. Tears of pain, tears of joy, tears of liberation. This wasn't just surfing. It was a symbol of his rebirth, his triumph over trauma, his return to life. He felt the wind playing with his hair, the salty spray touching his face. He was back in his element. The fear hadn't completely disappeared, but it no longer controlled him. Now it was just an echo, a reminder of what he had been through, and of how much stronger he had become. He turned, looking at the shore where his parents stood, and silently thanked them. Then he looked at the boundless expanse of the ocean, and his heart filled with a new, previously unknown gratitude. For everything. For the pain, for the fear, for the rescue, for the dolphins.
This was the moment when he rewrote his story. The ocean was no longer the place of his death, but had become the place of his new birth. After returning to the water, Kyle began to see the world through different eyes. It wasn't just a physical act of returning to a beloved hobby, but a profound spiritual transformation. This experience, which almost cost him his life, completely changed his values and priorities. He began to deeply reflect on the meaning of life, the fragility of existence, and the amazing connection between humans and nature. Now, every day was a gift, every wave a blessing. He sat on the shore, at his favorite spot, gazing at the ocean. But this time, his gaze was filled with calm and understanding, not fear or longing. He saw not just water, but a living, breathing organism. He made notes in a notebook. His thoughts were clear and profound. He read books on philosophy, on the human connection to nature, meditated, trying to find answers to the questions that haunted him. I was given a second chance, and I'm not going to waste it. This wasn't just a rescue, it was a sign, a calling to something greater. His voice in the narration sounded wise and calm, as if he had traveled a long road and found answers. He felt that his life now had a different purpose. He began to appreciate every day more, every small thing: the morning sun, the smell of fresh coffee, a conversation with a friend. He spent more time with family and friends, valuing their support, their love, which was his anchor. His attitude towards animals changed radically. If before they were just part of the ecosystem, now he saw them as intelligent, compassionate beings, capable of empathy and heroism. Especially dolphins. They were not just animals, they were his saviors, his guardian angels. He began to study dolphins, their behavior, their intelligence, their social structure. He read scientific articles, watched documentaries, spoke with experts, with biologists, with zoopsychologists. The more he learned, the more amazed he became. He understood that his rescue was not an accident, but perhaps an act of their conscious will, their goodwill, their amazing intelligence. They acted like true heroes, and he could not forget it. This was the realization of his mission. He felt that he had to tell his story to the world, to draw attention to dolphins, to their intelligence, to the need to protect marine life. His life now had a deeper meaning than just surfing and carefree existence. He felt a calling, a responsibility. Kyle began to write.
He described his feelings, his thoughts, his memories of that day. He wrote about the pain, the fear, the hope, the dolphins. His words were sincere, emotional, they pierced the heart. He spoke at local events, in schools, in community centers, telling his story. People listened to him, holding their breath. His words didn't just inform, they inspired, they changed consciousness. He showed photographs of his scars, his damaged board, and this made his story even more realistic, even more convincing. He began to understand that his story was not just about him. It was a story about connection, about compassion, about a miracle. It was a story about how the world holds not only evil and danger, but also goodness and mercy, even where you least expect it. He became a living testament to the fact that nature can be both cruel and incredibly kind, and he decided to dedicate his life to protecting that kindness. He felt this was his true purpose. For Kyle, dolphins ceased to be mere animals in the ocean, swimming in the water. They became a symbol of hope, a miracle, and the unbreakable bond between different species, between humans and nature. He began to visit places where wild dolphins resided, but no longer as a tourist seeking entertainment, but as a disciple, a grateful student, a person seeking understanding and respect.
He came to the coastline where he often saw dolphins. He sat on a boat, or on his surfboard, which had become for him a symbol of his rebirth, and simply observed the pod of dolphins. He didn't try to approach, didn't invade their space, didn't try to interfere with their lives, but only observed with respect and awe. He watched them play, communicate, and care for each other. It was so natural, so harmonious. He could spend hours watching them play, leaping out of the water, their bodies glistening in the sun, as they communicated with each other using their unique sounds. Every time he saw them, his heart filled with warmth and peace, a feeling of deep gratitude. His encounters with them were different now. This was not a meeting in danger, when life hung by a thread. This was a meeting with respect and gratitude, with a feeling of deep connection. He felt their energy, their intelligence, their kindness. Sometimes it seemed to him that they recognized him, that they remembered the day he was saved. It was an incredible but real feeling. He began to actively engage in marine life protection. He participated in conservation campaigns, organized fundraisers, spoke at conferences worldwide, sharing his story. His voice, once barely audible in the hospital room, now resonated loudly and confidently throughout the world. He became an ambassador for marine animals, their voice. They saved my life, and now I want to dedicate my life to them. I want to be their voice, their protector. I want people to understand how valuable these creatures are, how intelligent they are, how capable of compassion they are. His words would have a deep emotional resonance in the hearts of listeners. Kyle began volunteering at marine animal rescue centers, helping injured dolphins, seals, and whales. He cleaned pools, prepared food, assisted veterinarians. He felt that this was his duty, his purpose. It was a new life, full of meaning and purpose, a life he had never imagined for himself. He found true satisfaction in this, the feeling that he was doing something important. He created his own charity foundation, raising funds for marine animal rescue and dolphin research. He organized environmental campaigns, urging people to abandon plastic, to stop uncontrolled fishing. His story was a powerful tool that helped him reach people's hearts. He wrote books, articles, appeared on television. His scars, once symbols of pain, now became symbols of his mission, his dedication. He was no longer just a surfer. He became a protector of the ocean, its voice. His life, once focused solely on his own pleasure, was now dedicated to a greater purpose. He felt happy. Despite the pain and trauma, he had found his path, his calling. He was a living example of how tragedy can turn into triumph and fear into a source of strength and inspiration. Epilogue: A Letter to the Ocean. The sun slowly set below the horizon, painting the sky in the same golden-purple hues as on that fateful day, a year ago. Kyle sat on the shore, in the very spot where his story began, where his life changed forever. This was no longer the frightened young man fighting for his life,
but a wise, confident man, his gaze imbued with calm and determination. The wind gently played with his hair, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed. He held a sheet of paper in his hand, on which words were written in neat, legible handwriting. It was a letter to the ocean, a kind of prayer, a thank you, a promise, a summary of his journey. His voice in the narration read this letter, and in every word, the depth of his experience and the sincerity of his feelings could be felt. My dearest ocean, you nearly took my life. That night I was on the brink of death. But instead, you gave it back to me, gave me a second chance that I'm not going to waste. You showed me your power, your might, your mercilessness, your unpredictability, which I loved so much and feared so deeply. I will never forget that day. The pain, the fear, the cold, the feeling of my own insignificance in the face of such a majestic predator. And then, the miracle. Your children, the dolphins, who became my guardian angels, my saviors, my protectors. They risked their lives for me, a stranger they didn't even know, a stranger who was just a part of another world. They showed me that the world is filled not only with dangers, but also with compassion, mercy, and an inexplicable primal goodness. I am grateful for every breath, for every ray of sunshine that warms my face, for every wave that breaks on the shore, reminding me of life. I am grateful for the scars that remain on my body. They have become my symbols, a reminder of what I survived and how strong I am. My life has changed forever. Now I see you not just as a place for surfing, but as a living organism, a source of life that needs protection, care, and respect. I dedicate my life to you, ocean. I will be your voice, your protector, your ambassador. I will tell my story so that people understand how valuable these creatures are, how intelligent they are, how capable of compassion they are. Thank you for the second chance. Thank you for the lesson. Thank you for the dolphins. I will always return to you, ocean, with respect and boundless love. Your Kyle. After these words, Kyle carefully folds the letter and puts it in his pocket. He stands up, his gaze calm and confident. He takes a few steps towards the water, allowing the waves to wash over his bare feet. This isn't the fear that was there before. It's understanding and reconciliation now. He breathes in the salty air, smelling it, and smiles. The camera slowly rises into the sky, showing the boundless expanse of the ocean, the golden sunset spreading across the horizon, and perhaps silhouettes of dolphins leaping on the horizon as if saying goodbye to him or greeting him to a new life. This is a symbol of hope, rebirth, and the harmony that Kyle found within himself. He became a living testament to the fact that even after the greatest tragedy, one can find meaning, strength, and inspiration for a new life. His story will live on, as will the memory of the dolphins who saved his life. The ocean, once a threat, has now become his destiny.